Celebrating National Ag Day, we're joined by two guests shaping the future of Australian agriculture. Amanda Naish, founder of Australian Future Farmers Exchange, shares her mission to empower the next generation of farmers through education and opportunity. She highlights the alarming statistic of the average age of farmers in Australia and the need to encourage young people to return to farming. Amanda shares her journey in agriculture, the challenges young farmers face, and the misconceptions surrounding the industry. We also cover the diverse pathways available in ag and the supportive community that exists within the field. And Tegan, Milne, a solicitor specialising in commercial and succession planning at Beck Legal, delves into the critical topic of succession planning in ag, highlighting its importance for family farms. Tegan explains the nuances of succession planning, emphasising the need for early discussions among family members to avoid disputes later. We also touch on the challenges faced by farmers, the resilience required in the industry, and the collaborative nature of planning for the future of farming businesses. Meet my friends Amanda and Tegan. Hello Amanda, and happy National Ag Day.
Thank you, Kimberly. Happy National Ag Day to you too.
Now, you and your co-founder, Russell, are empowering our next generation of farmers through your business, Australian Future Farmers Exchange. And look, I do want to hear more about how the business started and what you do. But first, I actually love a good stat. And one that I found on your website was that the average age of farmers in Australia is 58 years old. Tell me, why are you so alarmed by that figure?
I guess we all have the image of the old fella on the farm, but it doesn't really hit home until we think about who's going to take over the farm when those people retire. And I think we're at that kind of critical point now in farming where lots of people have moved away from farms. Lots of young people have been discouraged from farms because they've seen mum and dad doing it tough or grandpa working really hard. And I think now is the time we need to encourage our young people to move back to farming and see the opportunities that are possible, because there are so many and kids just aren't being shown those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, you are doing incredible things by empowering that next generation. So tell me about your business. How did it start?
Well, it's a bit of a random story, I suppose. Myself and Russell were both ag teachers, so we both taught in high schools. We went to the National Ag Teachers Conference in Toowoomba a couple of years ago and just randomly got chatting about what we did and where we were from. And he's from Queensland, Plainland near Brisbane, and I'm northeast Victoria. So we just talked about how cool it would be to show our kids what the different states did. So I was completely blown away by cotton and sugarcane and all the things that happen in Queensland that we don't see in Victoria. So we had those conversations, the conference finished, we're all enthused, and then Russell rang and said, all right, well, if something's going to happen, we need to do it. We need to be the people who start it. And so from then we started organising a tour. Victorian students went to Queensland the first year and we travelled around by vehicle, just by four-wheel drives. We took our swags on a plane. We had 4 students to start with and we fundraised and got them sponsored by very generous local businesses who paid entirely for the trip. And that was our first year of Australian Future Farmers Exchange. And since then, we've done another exchange to northeast Victoria, and we're currently planning our 3rd exchange. So we've only been going for 2 years now.
That's the thing. When you mentioned that, in Queensland, there is such a different, I suppose, type of farming, isn't there, versus Victoria, versus even probably over in WA, just that versatile industry that it really is. So I suppose the question is, when you hear the word agriculture, what comes to mind?
Yeah, well, I guess our biggest bugbears was that the dumb kids do ag, particularly from an education point of view. It was always either not offered at school or it was the place where we put those kids that were hands-on or were mischievous in class or didn't want to learn. They just went and did ag and farming. And that really grinds my gears that that's our perception of ag. Whereas now I think ag is glamorous and it's amazing and it's a lifestyle and it's lucrative. It has so many opportunities for our young people. And I think that's the story we need to be showing our young people, not the drought and the hard times and the working 20 hours a day and sleeping for 2. And yes, there are hard days and yes, farming's not easy or for everybody, but it's still a very fulfilling lifestyle and career choice for a lot of our young people. And I think that's what they need to see more of.
Yeah. And even as a teacher, Amanda, do you find that you've changed your teaching style to make sure that there is that really broad overview and insight into the industry for the kids that are in that classroom?
Yeah, definitely. And that's been something with the exchange program that we've worked on, is having that connection with industry. We don't want education and industry to be two separate entities. We want that amalgamation of the two, because if we don't have young people going into industry, then those industries won't be supported. And so definitely teachers really like students, sitting in a seat in a classroom. And the last sort of 10 years that I've been teaching ag, it's all about getting out. Where can we go? What can we touch? What can we taste? How can we participate on farm? Which has definitely been a big change in my teaching practices, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now, with Oak, we're definitely looking to empower and showcase, celebrate, support our young females that do come through whatever industry it is that they want to do. Have you found that there are more young women coming into ag?
Definitely. And it's actually quite funny that we have last year's tour was 4 boys and 8 girls. Or 7 girls. So we were definitely more skewed to the female side. One of our good stories, I guess, is that we've had success just this last week with placing one of our girls from a tour last year into industry. So she's going to go and work in the Lockyer Valley. She was a Year 12 student this year, just finished. And next year she's secured a job at Koala Farms in the Lockyer Valley to start her ag career. She's amazing and she's exactly what they look for. And they were looking for somebody who would move into a management role, who would have the desire to learn and be organised and willingness to have a go at anything, and nothing daunts her. Tractors, chainsaws, whatever it is, she will have a go at anything. So it's been wonderful to see the female flying the flag for young girls in ag, definitely.
Absolutely. With it also, are these students, do they have a farming background, or are they just coming in really fresh and just want to know about the industry?
Both, actually. The young girl I was talking about just then, she wasn't off a farm. She had no farming background, but just really enjoyed it at school and loved to learn. Some of them, yes, do have a farming background, and probably it's interesting because the ones with a farming background, often it's the parents who are really keen for them to go on tour and see different things because they realise the importance of seeing different enterprises. Whereas the students who are from in town, it's often very student driven and they're very keen to get out and see things off their own bat, I guess.
So what are some unique challenges then that those young and emerging farmers are facing today, and how does your program support them in overcoming these?
It's funny, being in a high school, so I was in a high school last year and I've actually just changed to be in a primary school to try and get younger people excited about agriculture. But in talking to my sort of year 10 and 11 students, and particularly the girls, they always felt, or commonly I should say, they felt it was the connection and the ability to know where to go to get a job or to get help or to get skills. And whether it's self-consciousness, they weren't as keen to have a go as the boys were, I guess. And I hope that our program shows young people that you can just put yourself out there and have a go, talk to people, make those connections, make those networks, and they will help you in your career and in your future. And that the ag community is a really lovely community to be a part of, and everyone generally is very supportive of each other and of young people coming through. And if they're, wanting that lifestyle career, that ag is a great place to find it.
And what about you, Amanda? What is your ag background? How have you come into the industry?
I grew up on an Angus farm with my mum and dad. Always was a horsey girl, so always rode horses. Got into teaching, was actually a science teacher to begin with. And then I was lucky enough to travel around Australia and got a job on a cattle station in central Queensland and just absolutely loved it. It was like going home. We milked the cow in the morning to get our milk. We ate beef for breakfast, lunch and dinner. They mustered the cattle by horses. Yeah, it was just amazing. And I just thought every kid should experience this. I'd never felt so healthy. I'd never slept as good. I'd never been so content as being out there. Like, we worked hard days, long days, but it was just amazing. Yeah, and I think that sort of sparked my idea that kids should have access to this. They should see where their milk comes from and their beef comes from. And yeah, that's sort of, I guess, where it started.
It's almost like you have done full circle. Like
Yes.
like you're now offering that by even leveraging your skills as a teacher as well, to bring that to a whole new generation. I know I keep saying generation, but it really is, to all these kids, that they have that opportunity. I mean, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I'm too old, obviously, to do it now, but I would have loved to have gone on a station and just experienced that. I can't imagine how incredible that would have been.
Yeah, and it was all by chance. Like, it definitely wasn't a planned thing. And it was because I was a teacher that I got the job there in the first place, because I went to be their governess for their two gorgeous kids. And they had backpackers at the time who were working there, and they said, oh, okay, muster time, and everyone musters. So school stopped and they said, oh, can you ride a horse? I said, oh, yep, I can ride a horse. So that was it for the next 2 weeks. We were in the saddle, 8 hours a day mustering cattle. And it is funny how things go around in circles.
It is. I mean, Amanda, even teaching though, like, so many of us will think, okay, I'm going to be a school teacher in a classroom, maybe metro, possibly regional or rural, but there are so many other options, aren't there, then, even to, as you said, as a governess, to go out on a station?
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. And I always say to our kids, and even to other teachers, that ag is the ultimate cross-curriculum subject. Like, you can be doing fertilizer rates and seeding rates with maths, or working out concentrations of drench to give animals, or you could be doing geography when you're looking at, soil and topography and land and water use, and English when you're reading the Weekly Times. It encompasses everything. And so the idea that only dumb kids do agriculture is infuriating, because it's just so far from the truth now, and ever, I think. Our most resilient, smartest people do agriculture, I think.
That's such a misconception that needs to change. And I was speaking to someone a bit earlier today it was a lawyer around planning succession as part of the podcast series. And, again, it was just the idea that farmers, you just get by. That's just what you do. And, but really you're running these huge businesses that are so intricate, and there's so much that you need to know. Again, how do we change that narrative? Like, how?
Yeah, I think on your website there was a quote, you can't be what you can't see. And that just, if they don't know what's possible, they don't know what they can do. So that is our biggest goal, is to get kids out and just looking at what is possible. Even if they're into electronics, computer games now, so much of agriculture is going autonomous that we're going to need computer programmers and technicians to be running the tractors and the drones and all of that into the future. So there is a role for anybody in ag.
I think one of the easiest ways to, if it's not your industry to start with, is to get along to things like field days. And just Henty is huge. And it was probably there that I saw just how big those drones are now. Like, I had no idea that they'd gotten so big. I mean, they're
amazing, aren't they?
They could fly a person, honestly.
Yeah, well, we just recently went to Wagga, to the Charles Sturt University there, and I think the drone they had there had a carrying capacity of 100 kilos. So my youngest daughter's like 25 kilos. You could fly on that. She thought that was a great idea, but I wasn't so convinced.
I bet she would have. Absolutely.
Yeah, she would have tried.
Strap her in. Amazing. Well, how are you celebrating Ag Day?
Funnily enough, I'll be celebrating Ag Day with a bull who is arriving at our property to, we've just artificially inseminated some cows. So I'll be celebrating with a new bull that's arriving. And that's about it.
So there's definitely reason to celebrate that. Absolutely.
Random, yeah.
And in terms of people getting in touch and learning more about the program, how can they be a part of it?
I If they're a student, they can definitely go to our website and have a look at our application process. Isn't quite open yet. We're still refining our tour for next year, which will be in July, or the June, July school holidays, depending on which state they're in. And if you're a business or a farmer or somebody who would like to sponsor a student, there's options for either sponsorship or participation on our website.
Brilliant. It's incredible what you're doing, and really admire that, you already have such an important role in teaching, and then here you are running that side business as well, just to help other young people get into agriculture and really learn about what pathways are available to them. So amazing job, and thank you so much. Hello, Tegan, and happy National Ag Day.
Happy National Ag Day to you. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And even though it's not a topic that people would love to sit down over lunch and just, have a chat, but I think it's a really important part, and not only for those that are living in that industry, but even those from the outside, just to give them some insight into the legalities of what it's like to run a business that is farming.
Yeah, absolutely. So most people on National Ag Day would not think of their lawyer, I think, firstly.
No.
But for us, we think about our farmers every day in this office. So we do a lot of farm succession planning, which is a relatively new term. I think it's come out the last few years, but our farmers would hear it all the time now about succession planning. We're always very passionate to talk about it and want to make sure everyone's aware of what succession planning is and sort of plant the seed to get it started as early as possible.
Now, that seed may have already been planted. If you're a fan of Yellowstone, which is back on our screens, and let's do an episode another day on just how terrible that first episode back was of the mid-season break. But if you're a fan of Yellowstone, succession planning is probably something that you have seen played out on the screen. But being a legal expert, Tegan, can you explain to us, what is succession planning?
Absolutely. So we look at succession planning as the succession planning or personal estate planning. So when you think about personal estate planning, you're probably going to think about your will. And so leaving all of your assets to be distributed in your will. And that's fine for your personal assets. So thinking about your private house that you live in, your superannuation fund or bank accounts, they're all fine to travel through your will. But when we talk about our farm and our farming business, so where we're operating day to day, whether it be cropping or dairy or grain storage, whatever it may be, that's our business. And our business should not transfer through our will. So with succession planning, we treat it differently, and we try to hand over the reins throughout the lifetime, usually of mum and dad, if they're still in control of the farm. So they might have a child, a friend, or other family member that they're wanting to help step up and take over the farm while they're travelling along. We assist with that process throughout their lifetime and make sure that there's a smooth transition where everyone's involved and all the assets will pass during the lifetime and through different structures usually, so companies or trusts or even individuals. It's just taking all of those business assets outside of the will and making sure that they're transferred to who needs to take control and who's going to hand or carry on the farm.
I just noticed that you said lifetime a couple of times there. Is this something that is really talked about very early on in a family that have a farm, or is it a conversation that sort of comes up where you're coming near the end and you're like, well, the farm isn't forever for me, so I need to pass it on to, as you said, one of the kids or maybe a friend or someone outside the farm that they'll pass that on to?
Yeah, so lifetime is a very important topic for us, or passing assets during someone's lifetime. Historically, what has happened and what we have seen not work so well is that we've had mum and dad have their farm and operate a really great business for their entire life. Maybe they've had one or two children who have stayed on the farm to help them. They might have had two other children who have gone off to university or to the city to work and chosen not to do a farming lifestyle. And they have decided, as people naturally think, that they will hand over all of their assets through their will. and they haven't actually spoken about it with their kids or friends or family until we read the will. And then everyone finds out that the farm's actually not going to the farming children who thought that they would take it over. It's actually going to all 4 kids equally, and 2 don't know how to run a farm or want to run a farm, but now they have all inherited a massive business together, and that's where disputes can arise. That's what we've seen happen historically, unfortunately. And this is where succession planning has come into fruition or into popularity in the last few years, is that the whole idea of succession planning is getting mum and dad to talk about it early on. So everyone knows what's happening. Everyone can contribute to the plan as well. And it's not always that it will be to a child, because sometimes the kids don't want to take over the farm. It is a business. They may not want to run that business. So it's an important conversation to have and see if it's actually what they want to do as well. So we take everyone in the family and friends or whoever else is going to take over the farm, we take them all into consideration, and it's about making sure everyone knows what the plan is, basically.
I think even the fact that it is a business. Farming isn't a hobby. It's not just a lifestyle. For so many people, it's a business, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it's so easy to think about your farm as your life, because for a lot of people, it is their life. It's the first thing they start to do when they wake up. It's the last thing they do before they go to bed. They live where they work. All of their assets, personal and business, are at the same place. But it is a business. It is where we derive your income from. It is an asset as well. And in the last few years, so sort of last 10 years, we've seen the farming land in particular grow in value. So all of our farmers would be aware that the farming land prices have skyrocketed, and water rights prices have skyrocketed as well in the last few years. So we're finding that these are very valuable assets, and they need to be treated as their valuable assets. So we can't just leave it up to a will that could be disputed after mum and dad have passed. We need to sort of deal with those assets at the value that they are while everyone's around to make those choices.
So when it comes to sitting down with the family and talking about how to pass on the family torch, what does that look like? Is that a really quick and easy conversation, or is it something that plays out over years?
So actually having the conversation for succession planning, it's not a quick process, just because there are so many elements to discuss. When we have our clients, I would estimate, just a ballpark, it would be at least a 6-month process. And that's from the start, where we talk to the clients about how everything's set up now and how they would like it to be set up. We also involve their accountants or a financial planner, because once mum and dad hand over the farm, we still need to make sure that they're deriving income. So what we find with a lot of our farmers, especially mum and dad, is that they have not really given themselves much of a wage throughout the whole time that they've been running the farm. So they've usually just used the farm account as needed, which is absolutely nothing wrong with. We just need to make sure that once they do hand over the farm, they've still got access to income to pay for what they need, to pay for their life, and hopefully go for a holiday or 2 now that they've retired. But the process is longer, especially if we're moving assets. So if it is in someone's personal name and we want to move it to a land trust, which might be more appropriate structure to hold some property, we do need to consider capital gains tax implications and what exemptions might be applicable. So that does take a while, but also talking to the family members, because we do take a very collaborative and active approach with discussing the plan with the children or whoever might be taking over the farm. We really do value their opinion as well. So making sure that they're involved in the process and that their feelings and ideas are heard as well. So if the family all agrees from day one, it can be done very quickly, but oftentimes it's a longer conversation and process. Putting that in comparison to when it isn't done. So I've had recently a matter where there was no succession planning done, and mum and dad had a farm with 4 children, and there was one child that had worked on the farm their whole life and had been told by mum and dad that they would be taking over the farm when mum and dad passed. So they passed the farm through their will, come to read the will, and everything's left to all children equally. The other 3 didn't have an interest in keeping the farm, but a dispute did arise because there's different ideas on who should get the farm versus who needs to pay who out. And unfortunately, that dispute is still ongoing 2 years later. So the 6 months up front to make sure that everything works and we've got a plan that everyone agrees to is much quicker than if there's a dispute because there was no plan in place to begin with.
They're probably really awkward conversations, aren't they, to have with our kids sometimes, I imagine. And also, when you're explaining this to me, I mean, you do an excellent job, mind you, but there is so many intricacies to it. When you talk about capital gains and, there's super and there is so much that's involved. Like, it must be so overwhelming for people when they come in.
Absolutely. And because it is their life that they live day to day, I find a lot of our clients don't have a bird's eye view like we do. We can kind of look at it and compartmentalize it and legally do things. But when you live it day to day, you're not looking at all the little elements that build up your personal asset base and your business asset base. So you don't know what needs to transfer anywhere. And it is a lot of conversations that need to be had, especially if there's multiple children that are taking over parts of the farm, because it's easy to think about the land, but you've got to think if your land for your business needs water. So does the water rights need to go with the land? If child one's taking one parcel of land, do they also need to take water from the other parcel, or how is that going to work? And the most important part for us is making sure that, sure, we've got a legal plan in place, the documents are all there, everything will work legally, people will get what they want, but once it is transferred over, can the business still run as it is? So have we transferred the right things to the right people to make sure it can continue on as it has been? And that's where we really rely on our clients and their knowledge of their own farm and how everything operates to sort of develop that plan with them.
There are so many parts there. How is it that you've come to love this part of law, so family succession planning?
Yeah, it is. It's a very niche area, I will say. It's getting more popular, but myself, I grew up in Moama, so I had a lot of farming friends, very agricultural. I was not on the farm. I don't think I could do any manual labour, unfortunately. So I went to La Trobe in Bendigo, moved there in 2015. I started to study. I thought I might go back to Moama, but I've actually loved Bendigo and the region, and we have so many farming clients. So our firm's really lucky that we also have a second firm in Swan Hill. So we've got a lot of access to Swan Hill clients in that region as well that are all into farming. And the great thing, I guess, about Bendigo is that it's still a small town to me, still has that small town feel where you know everyone, and it is more regional and rural. So I just love working with our farming families and helping them put a plan in place. And because it's more collaborative and making sure that everyone's voice is heard, I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. Not so much the dispute side afterwards. I'll still do it, but it's not as fun.
No, I don't imagine it is. Over the years of doing this, have you found that you have this greater appreciation of what farmers do for us?
Absolutely. I know what I can do, which is send a couple emails, write a couple documents, but our farmers are the backbone of our country. So we are very, very lucky, very, very grateful for all of their work.
I mean, it's very much like your accountant and your doctor. They're not transactions. They're these really personal connections that you build.
Yes.
Through that, I imagine that you've really heard some great stories about, how the farm was started and even going through drought and all the different weather elements that they have and just that resilience that they have to just keep on going.
Absolutely. The resilience and the ability to pivot when things are not going right, or if cropping season didn't eventuate as expected, just the ability to pivot and keep on going is incredible. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for getting in touch and just making us aware that this is a really big part of National Ag Day. It isn't just about learning where our food and fibre comes from, but, also those little intricacies that families and farmers are dealing with and how that incredible property is then transferred and handed down through the generations. Thank you so much for giving us a little insight into that and just how intricate it is and how long drawn out it can be. And I can't imagine that it's all really easy. And I bet you're wishing it was. But I just want to say thank you so much for that. It has really been insightful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been great to talk everything National Ag Day.
Now, before you take off with all that inspiration and knowledge, we'd love for you to leave a review on our podcast so that we can continue to amplify women's voices in the media. And if you have any questions, we'd like to celebrate a win, you can always connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Oak Magazine AU. I'm so glad we've met and that now you know a friend of mine.